Welcome back to the Black Sheep podcast from Wire Differently. This is John and Jason here. Jason, that we know online with talking into the horses, right?
Hmm.
You have that wisdom that you show to us. Jason lives in North Cold of Ontario. That's where nobody lives. I'm
Yeah,
kidding.
that's kind of true.
Now, I'm not going to tell your last name because, well, people screw up my name, so I don't want to screw up yours. And I know if I try, I will screw it up for sure. So I'll let you introduce yourself here because you have a very interesting path of life, and then we can keep talking and visit like millions of subjects that we have planned for us.
Yeah, sounds good. So yeah, my name's Jay Sobkowicz. Um, it's funny that everybody says I live in Northern Ontario when the reality is it's just Western Ontario. I live right along the Manitoba border in that little corner of Ontario by Manitoba and Minnesota. And it is one of the worst weather places in Canada. We have the extreme cold of winter and we have the extreme heat of summer right here. So yeah, that's where I live. So my last name gets butchered all the time, John. So don't feel too bad.
Well, no, I don't feel too bad, but you know what I mean. Like at least for the first episode where you show up, right?
Yeah.
I want it to be said properly, so I don't screw that
Well,
up.
I'll be quite honest. I don't know how to say your last name properly because I don't really have a good grasp on French. So,
Well, it's a Ron Archambault. There you go. See,
oh, there you go. Yeah, I'll never remember that one.
forget the Ron. I just I feel like every time, especially here, I hear that a lot. Right, every time that you hear someone, oh, he's French. Oh, Ron, and I'm like, I never heard that before, right?
Yeah.
And
What does
and
that even mean? Ho, ho, ho.
I think it's from the Little Mermaid, right? The lobster, is it the lobster as a French in it,
Oh, yeah,
or
yeah.
it's a candle, one of the
No, that's
bijou.
Lumiere. That's Lumiere
Yeah,
from
yeah.
Beauty and the Beast.
Okay, so then it's bijou. Is it bijou? It is. I don't know, man. Like, I think it's Little Mermaid. I'm guessing this is what it is, and it's the
Isn't his name Sebastian,
yeah,
the crab?
yeah. And I
Yeah.
think that's where it's from. And worst case, if I can find the link for this, I'll put it here somewhere. But I never heard that in French, right? So every time I heard like ho ho ho, I'm like, what the frig is this? Like, what are you talking about? But yeah,
It's
anyways,
this the standard slang of French Canadians, eh? Ho, ho, ho.
yeah,
It's like everybody thinks that every third word we say is a.
yeah, yeah.
Although I have met a few people that say a all the time. So
Mm-hmm. It's like people who swear a lot, right? It becomes just a habit to use the
yeah,
words, right? For adjective, pronouns, whatever you want to call it.
somewhere to fill in with words to say when there's an awkward pause, I suppose.
Hey, there you go. That was now court piles. But there's not only that. Actually, apparently, like A means in like long time English, there was a double sorry. It's like sorry A, which is double sorry sorry.
Really, I had
Yeah,
no idea. That's
yeah,
news to me.
yeah.
So there you
So
go, Canadians apologizing, eh?
well, A, I tell you, we're gonna make a score. I'm gonna run a score just as we go, and by the
Yeah,
end of that episode, we can see how many times we said it. But
yeah. We
yeah,
need a ticker tally on A's.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, we should. We should. We're at 19. Um, it's been 2 minutes. So
Yeah, and we're rambling. That's okay.
yeah, here we go. That's what we were doing. What for 30 minutes before we started to record.
Yeah. Oh
We're
well.
talking about a bit everything.
Yeah. So you want me to tell you about my journey a little bit or about my story?
Well, yeah, exactly. So, I mean, I personally know your journey, right? And,
Yeah.
and if people have been following you online, they most likely know as well that you talk to
Mhm.
horses, that you have a family, that you're fit. I mean, we see you running, but you have a wisdom as well that you bring into the bucket too. Um, and that doesn't come easily, and it
Yeah.
comes with usually a path that is a bit more rocky, a path that is more of hardship, and so on and so forth. So like I said, like we don't have to go in the depth, but um what I like about the people who comes on the Black Sheep podcast is the fact that doesn't matter where the field they brought them, right? At first it could be like the military, could be whatever it is, a doctor or whatnot, but we all go through our own sort of hardship and challenges that makes us us, right?
Yeah.
And in your case, you went through a unique kind of life. I mean, and my condolences for you. I mean, months ago, a month ago, I think roughly,
Yeah.
your mom passed, which is not an easy step either to go through. You're pretty
Yeah.
young, from what I know. So I mean, life. has not been necessarily easy, but you're still pushing, and this is what is so inspiring to see you going. So, I mean, you were OPP, or you still OPP, I believe, right? Which is the
Yep.
Ontario Police that we have.
Yep.
And were you just up north?
Yeah, well, I've always been. So I'm one of those sort of homegrown small town guys.
Yeah.
Born in Fort Francis, raised here, took off for trade school when I was just getting out of high school. And then as my path continued to unwind in my early 20s, I found myself in policing, in a policing career. My other option was the military, but the police force got to me first. Um, and yeah, I'm still employed by the OPP. Part of my story revolves around PTSD and mental health trauma as a result of my employment. But currently still am a technical member of the Ontario Provincial Police. I've been a policeman for about 19 years now.
Wow.
Um, yeah, and it wasn't until recently that I was really taking a hard look at my life to discover that it was a non-standard path from birth to where I am now. And it is unique in some ways. I'm not the only person that's ever lived this kind of life, and there's many people out there like me.
Mm-hmm.
But just to give a quick background, um, I was born to a teenage mother. She was 17 when she got pregnant with me and had me at 18. She married my biological father before I was born because that's what you did back in the day. And my mother had me and my sister. And then at the age of 2, my father took off and left my mother at 19 with 2 babies and no child support and no support at all. So I grew up in that kind of unique circumstance where we were, living on the poverty line, and life, even though I was a child and at the time didn't really think of it this way, I never knew what it meant to um, be living in poverty. I didn't know what it meant to have healthy food options or um, have a stable home with a mother and a father. It didn't mean anything to me as a child. It wasn't until later on I recognized a lot of the personality traits that I possess and the characteristics of my personality were probably molded by those first years and the challenges that I felt and that I experienced. Um, and then somewhere along that line, somewhere when I was 5 or 6, um, my sister and I were being babysat by an older couple that lived down the road. My mom she never graduated high school, but she was able to get her nursing degree. Back in the 80s, you could sort of walk into a nursing clinic, and I don't know if there was an entry test or if they liked who you were and you worked hard, you became a nurse. And so my mother um, became a nurse in the mid 1980s at the age of about 21 or 22 with a couple of young kids. And so we were being babysat by this older couple, and and I don't know, I don't have any good memory of this, and I don't have a whole lot of details, but at some point it was revealed that my sister and I were being sexually molested by the babysitters. And this was an older couple, and there was a big police investigation. And my only real memories of this time in my life are the police investigation and being interviewed and trying to draw pictures of what I would explain because I was such a little boy at the time. So I suppose it's a blessing in disguise that I don't have any kind of real intimate, detailed memories of this, only that I know that it happened. And then so life carried on for me. And then my mom met another guy, and he was a really good stepdad for several years. He um, treated me like a son in ways, and then had a child with my mom. And we thought that was kind of going to be our life. And then that ended up dissolving because who was my stepdad at the time, he fell into his own mental health illness. And, back in the mid 80s, with the complete lack of understanding of what mental health illness was, there wasn't a whole lot of options for treatment and getting through mental health trauma back then. So my mom ended up splitting with this guy. And I got a little baby brother out of this deal. And I can remember being 9, 10 years old and having to be at home and babysit my sister and brother, when there was no options for my mom, but she had to work, or we would get home after school and there was no babysitter. And back in the late 80s, that kind of stuff was not allowed, but it's what you had to do to get by, right? There was really no options for my mom. So that carried me through into my teenagehood. And teenagehood was a difficult time for me because I didn't hit puberty till I was almost 18 years old. So I was very small growing up. I'm a small statured person anyways. I'm only about 5'7" at the best of times, even if I'm, oh, lost your sound there, John.
About now.
There, that's better.
It's perfect size. I just want to push it here. It's a perfect height. After that, it's too tall.
That's
So
there you go. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, all of these things that were occurring in my life, I didn't know that they were going to end up being an enhancement to me. I didn't realize that trauma was such a powerful teacher at the time.
mhm.
So, I had what is considered a traumatic childhood, a traumatic upbringing because of certain circumstances, though I didn't really think of it that way. And then going into teenagehood and getting into high school and being the second smallest male in the entire school was a challenge because um, I had something to prove, and being a small person, you always feel like you have something to prove when you're less athletic and you're not as big and strong. And you see all the other boys in grade 9 going through puberty, and here you are as like a prepubescent male in front of a bunch of guys that are turning into adults. So there was a lot of bullying and harassment that went with that. One of the unique things about me, though, leading up to this was when I was 8 years old, I got introduced to martial arts, where everybody in my hometown was a hockey player. I was a martial artist, and I was the only kid growing up who was dedicating himself to martial arts when everybody else was dedicating themselves to hockey. So when I was 14 years old, I had been training martial arts for 6 years and had developed a certain amount of confidence. And that got me into a little bit of trouble because I ended up not backing down from fights and ended up having to stick up for myself and for my siblings, and um, had to do things, with physical violence in order to protect myself and my sister and my brother. And it wasn't what I wanted to do, but it was necessary at the time. And then finally in grade 8, I hit puberty and things seemed to smooth out. And I played football with a bunch of guys, and I got into a group of friends that seemed to appreciate me for who I was. And things kind of smoothed out for me a little bit. Um, I didn't really have a clear path at this time, but I got jumped into trade school, and um, I got my welding certification. So I was a certified welder, and I was a first year millwright apprentice.
Okay.
And I was working in this career, and I ended up taking on a catastrophic back injury that took me out of the industry permanently. And there was several years, probably about 3 years, 4 years, where I was doing a lot of rehab in order to try and get myself better from this pretty serious back injury. And the surgeon literally said, if you continue on in this kind of career, you're going to end up in a wheelchair. So it wasn't something that I could take lightly. I had to really buckle down and try and figure out a way to overcome the severity of this back injury that I had taken on. So that made me kind of in a state of wandering because I just lost the career that I had chosen. I'd spent 2 years in trade school,
Mhm.
only to get hurt and then recognize that that was no longer an option for me. So there was a little bit of hard thinking, and I recognized quickly after jumping from job to job just to satisfy my financial needs in a world where I was a young 20 something boy with no idea what I was going to do with a career. So I got into sales. I was a bouncer at a bar. I worked for the public works here in Fort Francis. I did a bunch of small jobs, and I recognized very quickly that I hated the 9 to 5 type of life.
Yeah.
Um, didn't like working in an office, couldn't stand being stable or sitting around doing what felt like and I say this with air quotes, non-important work. That's how I felt internally. It has nothing to do with what that really means out in the real world. But for me personally, I couldn't stand that. I needed something with adventure and chaos because that seemed to be where I operated best. And I think that goes back to my personality and how it developed in a sort of a chaotic family environment growing up.
And I think you're right because we talked about that just before recording, and when you're raised into chaos and life becomes calm, you're looking for chaos
Mm-hmm.
because chaos is what is comfortable versus the calm aspect, the safe aspect. This is not what your body is used, and to an extent, I think it's the child, the inner child that has been used to this, that is looking for it because that's where it's been comfy, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it would have been a foreign environment for me to suddenly find myself in like a nuclear family situation.
Mm-hmm.
And oddly enough, my mother, who passed away recently about 5 weeks ago, and my stepfather in 1997 or 1998, one of those, yeah, I think it was 98. I come home from school one day and my mom's sitting on the couch with a guy. Okay, that's cool. She's a grown woman. She'd have been in her mid 30s then.
Hmm.
And this has been my stepdad ever since. And the funny backstory about this is, so in 1974,
Yep.
my mom and my stepdad became lovers in grade 8. And my family and my stepdad's family had always been close family friends. So there was already a connection to my stepdad's family.
Hmm.
So in grade 8, my stepdad and my mom decided that they were lovers. And they dated and they stayed together throughout high school until grade 11.
Nice.
And then what happens is they break up with each other. And my mom starts to go and date the much older guy who's already out of high school, who was my biological father, was 5 or 6 years older than her.
Yeah.
And she gets pregnant. And then you fast forward to 1997, and my mom and my stepdad are both find themselves divorced with 3 children, out single partying, and they reconnect. So after all these years, these little star-crossed lovers from high school ended up reconnecting and being married for 25 years, and our families blended together, and all of a sudden we had this nuclear family. So it was really neat to see that, because I ended up with this very interesting dynamic family where my mother has 3 children with 2 different dads. And
Hmm.
I mean, there's no way to say it. She was an irresponsible woman who was just trying to make it in life, and she didn't know, and she tried her best.
Yeah.
My biological father took off and went and had 3 more children with another woman, and I had no idea. And then my stepdad had 3 children from a marriage. And so I ended up with 5 brothers and 3 sisters, and I was the oldest one. And I had this cool blended family. And I mean, to this day, my stepsister and my 2 stepbrothers are just like blood brothers to me, and blood sister. It wouldn't mean anything to me to say that they're not actual family just because they're not genetically or matching my DNA. Like it really feels like they are family after 25 years, a
That's
quarter
awesome.
century. Yeah. So just a quick finality and leading up to the PTSD thing, I got into policing, or I wanted to get into the military because I was looking for chaos. I was actively seeking a chaotic lifestyle because I knew that's something that was interesting to me. It was what made me feel like I was at home, was when there was anxiety ridden environments, or if I put myself voluntarily into something like that. That's where I felt the best.
Okay.
And in my martial arts experience, I felt the best when I was in combat and fighting in tournaments, which I did a lot of.
Hmm.
um, and in the real world, if my job was chaotic and hectic, I felt the best. I felt like I was able to do my best work, so it got me into policing. And yeah, I did 19 years in policing. There's some stories I can tell about what happened in my career, and we can get into that as things go on. But um, ultimately, what happened was there was a pretty serious incident that occurred to me, and it ended up evolving into PTSD. And I did what classic men do in 21st modern Western culture, and I hit it. And I pretended for years and years that everything was okay and hunky dory. And behind closed doors, I was slowly starting to fall apart. I know you're smiling because I know you feel this and you've experienced this yourself. So it's like
Yeah.
I'm talking to somebody who gets it, right?
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I did my best to hide it. And then eventually, when I couldn't just hide it on my own, I started reaching for things to help me hide it. And then the drinking started to get out of control. And then the over the counter painkillers started to get out of control, because that was my thing. I would keep a bottle of Tylenol or Robax Platinum, Robaxaset pain, like back pain meds. And if things were starting to get pretty jacked up for me at work, or I was having a stressful day, I'd pop a bunch of those 6, 8 at a time, and it would
Oh
help
wow.
numb me. Yeah. It,
Excuse me. Woo!
it oh, there you go. It got pretty bad near the end. There were a few days where I think I probably took more than 15 to 20 pills throughout the day just to continue getting numb, because I was growing a bit of a tolerance to it, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And so, at the very end of, um, falling or continuing to dig myself into a deeper pit near the very end, I was a pretty big wreck. And I was doing it in such a way that I was pretty professionally hiding it from the rest of the world. And even my wife who knew that something was wrong. I mean, she was watching my decline, and I was always just saying, yeah, I'm good, I'm fine, everything's okay, just rough day at work, I'm tired, I'm
Yeah.
exhausted. I was always using the excuse that it was shift work and that it was because it was crappy things to see on the job as a policeman. It's, every day's
Yeah.
dealing with crap, right?
Yeah.
But I was dying inside, mentally and physically and
So,
spiritually and
yeah.
emotionally. And well, here I am now after battling PTSD, from what happened starting in 2009. So we're 14 years later, and I'm in the midst of recovering from the traumatic experiences that I dealt with on the job and the associated symptoms of PTSD and depression and anxiety and panic attacks.
Yeah,
And yet,
and you gain a bunch of weight too, eh? Right? The body responded to the
yeah,
avoidance.
oh
Because I
yeah,
saw the picture that you posted online, and you gained a good 40 pounds, I'd say.
75.
75. Okay, well,
I'm
times
75
two.
pounds lighter. Yeah.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
insane.
Yeah, man. It's that was, I was always an athletic person. When I found my stride when I hit puberty, I found the gym was a real big thing for me. Weightlifting became something, and then distance running and martial arts and squash were sort of my thing, and I really enjoyed them. And so I was never an elite athlete by any means, but I was always in the upper 5% of people who gave her pretty hard and were able to maintain a pretty decent level of physical fitness. And
Yeah.
that was in real serious decline, a few years into my traumatic struggles that I was hiding. And yeah, I slowly ballooned myself up from being a fit 180-pound guy to 235 pounds
Wow.
on the day of my wedding just over 8 years ago. So yeah, the weight gain was something serious. And it happened over such a slow time. I didn't realize I had almost 80 freaking pounds to lose, man.
That's
That's a third of a human.
yeah. Yeah, it's insane.
Yeah.
Uh,
And I can't even look at myself and think that that was what I was 80 pounds heavier than I am right now.
and I mean, I'm the same. I look at the picture versus, let's say, like when I was the healthiest,
Mm-hmm.
physically at least. Let's go with physically the healthiest, because I think that it creeps in, right?
Oh
It's a
yeah.
pile up, right? It's a how did I call it for policing, especially? It's death by thousand paper cuts, right?
Yep.
Like another call, and you don't really have time, right? You just report next, and sometimes it's just next call, and then reports for the rest of the next day or whatever that is, right? But um I find that at a certain point, the body said, I cannot take it anymore. And I started to avoid that because I was going to the gym like still, right? So the activity was the same. But for some other reason, I was gaining. And then the sleep really declined even more. Yeah, and then the years went, and I was just ignoring it, right? So I find that everyone who went through that path, we all have the same kind of path, right? Whatever the substance we use, but the path of like, yeah, ignore this. It's showing me a light, right? The life is telling you, look up here. There's flashing. It's okay. It's okay. I can
Yep.
keep pushing it. And the funny part is, and I don't know if you have the same thing, but I'm now realizing that I want to be extremely aware, right? I don't want to fall again into the numbness of wearing a mask or not knowing the feeling I should feel at this moment, and so on and so forth. So there's a fear of falling back, but when the breakthrough comes in, when the PTS growth come in, is an amazing feeling, but also a regain of control into your own life,
Yeah.
that I find
Yeah.
great.
I agree. And one of the things that has come from this is that I've become very intimately aware of my body and my physiology now. And when things are off, because I've realized that in order to get myself through this, I've had to develop a very consistent habit of life.
Mm-hmm.
So on most days, my life is a very routine habit. I'm awake at the same time. I generally go to bed at the same time.
Yep.
I do most of the same things every single day.
Mm-hmm.
And in that way, I've developed, like I said, a real intimate or acute sense of introspection and interoception, which is like the internal state of my body and how I'm feeling and what my emotional state is. And because I've been through, I call myself, I think that what I have lived is a very beautiful and traumatic life. I
Okay.
have experienced, and so have you. I mean,
Yeah.
and I'm not unique in this way. It's just that I get to look at it in my own unique way. And maybe
Hmm.
that's what makes me special as opposed to some other people is I see it as beautiful in a certain way.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that if I could rewrite my own history, I would want to go through it all again. But at least in a philosophical and a spiritual way, I'm able to sort of squeeze out the meaning and the reason and the why and develop this acute awareness, this ability to
Yeah.
very sensitively see myself now and know when things are off, which is a real bonus in the face of PTSD is all of these nuggets of wisdom and all of these like super tools that you develop because of this, right?
Yep. Yeah. So you know, I think the same way, except I've been telling myself, like, would I do it again? Right.
Mhm.
And like you, like, I mean, it's a different upbringing by all means that I've had, but there's childhood trauma related to it, and different than yours, obviously. But this aspect brought it to, well, it made me, and it made me up to whatever teenager, and then whatever I went through teenager made me as a young adult, right? Young adult went through the amount of crap, and then adult went through an amount of crap, which is just normal. Adulthood sucks at time, but and it makes me me now. Now, one thing that I discovered throughout the process of PTS growth is self-love, which I find that a lot of first responder keep forgetting, because we take
Mm-hmm.
care of everyone around us, right? And put your mask on first, right? Is not done.
Yeah, I love that line, man. I use that all the time. You got to put your mask on first because that just so very distinctly proves that your self care is paramount to being able to care for others.
Yeah, and save others, right? So,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, and I think, and I don't know about you, but the end of, like, when I really started to decline, and I declined fast, I was looking at it as I was dead inside, right? But there's compassion fatigue that they call, right? I didn't
Yeah.
give a flying fuck. Your call is the same as the other, but for them it was a crisis. Yeah, but it's
Yeah.
the fourth whatever domestic about the same stupid thing, that there's too many salt in my plate, so I started to yell at her because 3 weeks ago she was a bitch or whatever that is, right?
Yeah.
And all right, whatever, right? Like, your two adults grow up somehow,
Yeah.
but that compassion fatigue was removing everything there. Any human parts of the person was removed. It was just
Yeah.
and out, or cruise control if you rather, right? You don't feel anything on cruise control. You don't press. You just go. You're a
Yeah.
Tesla on automatic, fucking going.
Yeah. There's no input required, right, John?
Yeah.
So yeah, I kind of felt like when I was at my lowest, I look at it now and I think of it like there is a spectrum of experience that we have.
Yep.
And in those experiences, there's also a spectrum of feeling and emotion with, seething anger being sort of at the extreme on the right and the most transcendent joy being at the extreme of the left.
Yep.
And what I found was as time was going by, I was chopping at the extremities of my ability to experience, and I was narrowing that scope of ability to have feeling and emotion till I was just almost dead inside, where
Yep.
I wasn't even able to feel extreme joy on one end or even feel extreme anger on the other end. It was just
Mm-hmm.
sort of this nihilistic center that was left, which was neither black nor white. It was just this
Was there.
it was just a place of existence that had almost no emotions. I was almost completely just void inside. And that was one of the things that I started to recognize that I was missing out on feeling true love and joy for my kids
Yep.
and from my marriage. And I wasn't even getting enjoyment out of hanging out with people. I wasn't interested in going anywhere. I always was avoiding social things, and my wife was constantly urging me to go out and do stuff, and I just shut it down so often.
Yep.
And we could talk for hours because there's a lot to this, but um, last year, for the first time, my wife asked me to go on a hike, and
Okay.
I had said no, like hiking, no thanks. But I finally got to a point where I was starting to say yes to experiences again, and it was one of the more profound moments in my recovery, especially with my wife, because I hiked up this little tiny hill. It wasn't a big mountain. There's no mountains around here, but we've got some big deep valleys and some decent little rolling hills that are a couple thousand feet. So you can get a bit of a hike going. And we hiked up to the top of this hill in Thunder Bay, Ontario.
Mm-hmm.
And I was overcome with emotion because of this. Because for the first time, I was actually opening up to experience after feeling like I was shut down for so long.
Yeah.
And what I was feeling was the expansion of that spectrum of emotion again, where I was starting to feel joy. Like I was starting to finally see things beautiful again. And I was actually able to express anger and sorrow on the opposite end of that spectrum again. And this hike was just like a poof. It was like a light bulb moment. Like, oh my gosh, I'm finally getting there again. I'm finally starting to feel like a human throughout all of the darkness that I've just experienced.
And there's a dopamine factor as well that comes with it, right? There's something that there's a reward that your body gives you. Because I mean, I've seen that little post or video recently online, and it's that person who's walking on a hike, and she's like, "There's no person in the world who say, oh yeah, it's fun. I'm going on a hike." It's like, I hate this thing. Screw this thing. Like, oh my back. And
Yeah.
and I mean, I laugh because I thought about that last weekend. We were hiking Johnson Canyon in Banff,
Yeah.
and there was a change of pressure, weather change, and so on and so forth. And we're 1 kilometer away from the ink pots on top, which is I think a six click up, six
Yeah.
point
I've done
seven.
I've done that hike a few
You
times.
did?
Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah.
And because of the pressure, altitude, and so on, my brain is just pounding. So I look at my son, who's 5 years old, and I'm like, "Boy, we're going back down. We're not doing it." He's like, "What's going on, Dad?" I'm like, "We'll find a bear another day," because he just want to see a bear, which he
Oh
doesn't
yeah.
understand that it's not the best thing
Yeah.
at this moment. But so we're walking back, and I'm like, God damn, hiking. Right? But when we arrive at the campsite and so on, it was a relief, right? It was a dopamine hit that started to hit the grounding, the just being in the present moment,
Yeah.
right? Because that's what pain bring you, or not pain, but it's exercise. Exercise bring you in the now, right? Same as running, right? You can stop somehow thinking if you want to, or some people plan stuff,
Oh
but
yeah.
you don't. I personally am not able to go in the past when I run. I mean, okay, I have to make my steps now,
Yeah.
and what am I able to think now to just keep going versus like I'm not in the, oh man, what I saw yesterday, I'm not able to do this, I'm not able to do the rewind aspect while doing a sport or body activity, right?
Yeah.
But bring your mental health to another level because
Yeah.
it's
Well,
keeps you there.
it's really hard to focus on your sadness when you're, in the middle of a hard workout. It really seems to allow you to, like you said, be right present with your body, because especially when you're pushing yourself on a pretty hard workout or
Yep.
a good hard run.
Yep.
um you're distinctly aware of the discomfort of what you're doing, and so you're hyper focused on it. Now I do get into a bit of a flow state, I would say, when I'm out on a distance run,
Yep.
something longer than 10 kilometers, where I'll get into a groove and I won't listen to music. Sometimes I'll run without earbuds or anything, and I'll just kind of let my mind wander.
Yep.
And sometimes when I'm running, I'll usually have my phone for music that's playing in the background if I have my earbuds in, or else I'll just use it like a stereo and it'll be playing through the speaker of my phone. And
Yep.
I carry a little fanny pack when I'm running that keeps my stuff in it. Sometimes I get some pretty profound thoughts going on when I'm running.
Really.
Sometimes, yeah, like when I'm out on a run, I'll my mind will just be wandering, and what you said is what I'm getting at. I'm not having thoughts about negativity. I'm not having thoughts about my past and how difficult my life was in certain areas of it, or who wronged me and how resentful I was. I'm right present with the thing, but it's allowing my mind to sort of freely expand while
Third
I'm doing
person,
it.
third person view type deal.
Almost,
Yeah.
almost, yeah. Like it's like my mind and my body almost separate, where the physical part that I'm doing just becomes the thing that I've told it to do, and I'm able to escape and just allow myself to freely think. And that has come with the evolution of healing through this trauma, because for a long time, and you know this very well, and many people who have experienced trauma will tell you this, that that's the only thing on your mind day in and day out, because you're fighting it all the time. It's the enemy at the gate, and you're standing at the other side of that
Mm-hmm.
gate every single moment. So you can't be present in those times, and you have no desire to exercise. And hiking does feel like a huge waste of time. And you know that
Yeah.
hike with my wife, it wasn't about the hike at all, because it wasn't like it was hard exercise. It was only about 1,000 foot climb, and it was, very minor. And we did a little meditation when we got at the top. It was the whole point of actually doing. It was that I was actually able to finally put my running shoes on, get out of the house and be somewhere and do something that she wanted to,
Yeah.
instead of constantly having to curtail our plans because of how I was feeling inside.
Yeah. See, and I think that we talked about that because we've been talking with my wife about all those things around, and she, um, can I say that? I find that she told me that she had to get used to the new me, right? Which
Oh
which
yeah.
which she's like, I was walking on eggshell around you because if I would say
Yeah.
something that would throw you off, right? And still as of today, right, there's stuff that she doesn't tell me, and it's not personal stuff, obviously, but she will not set me off like she's afraid of setting me off about politics, right? So whatever the news that we had recently about the ovation for a Nazi in Canada Parliament,
Oh yeah.
I'm like, did you know this? And she's like, yeah. And I was like, here, you didn't want to tell me. I'd rather not. And I was like, Jesus. But
Well,
and it's not the same anger it used to be. I'll put it that way, right?
yeah.
But it still happened, right? It's still because I was angry at the world,
Oh yeah.
um, and and because of that reason, I stayed home. I didn't want to leave home.
Yeah.
I remember forcing myself to go to swimming lessons for my oldest, and I was listening to those parents, right? Which we have a pretty good life, I found in Canada. I mean, there's stuff that could be better, but it's like everywhere else.
Yeah.
We can evolve and get shit better. So, but in that case, they were complaining about such a small thing, like, oh, the parking lot was packed. Like, if it's the only thing that is going wrong in your life, you are having a pretty good life. Stop complaining, right? Like, there's
Yeah.
people in this world that are suffering, and what you can complain about is a parking lot. Or it's a small talking that I could stand, right? So I would be on my phone and talk to my wife and be like, that person, that Karen air quote, here we go, is
Yeah.
complaining, right? And I would be like, whatever. So round up, same thing. I think the one that I can feel is happiness, joy, right? Or feelings from others,
Yeah.
right? And that's another thing. I couldn't read people. And that's another thing. And that's the one of the reason we started to talk. It's been what, 2 months? At least 2 months, I would say. I saw you on the
Yeah.
collective with Sean and Big Bird and Chance. And I was interested. I was like, oh, kind of a different feel, right? Like, because you brought that kind of philosophy. I have to say it in English properly.
That's a good
Um,
one for you to say in your French accent, eh? Philosophy. Philosophize.
philosophy.
Philosophize. Should try and do an English accent someday. That'll be hilarious.
Next time you're gonna say my last name, you'll see I'm gonna get you there.
Okay.
And I'll say yours. But
Yeah, sounds good. Try and pronounce that one.
my wife is Ukrainian. I'm gonna work on it.
Oh,
Trust me.
there you go. I mean, that's
Uh,
pretty close to Ukrainian, that last name.
yep, yeah, it does. There's a
It's
little bit.
Polish, but I mean, they're neighbors.
Yeah, one hate the other, right? I
I
think.
don't know. I wasn't ever born there, so I don't know.
Anyhow, but all of that to say, there's that wisdom that I found very interesting. That is not something that we find quite often in people, or actually, it's not. I think a lot of people have wisdom, but they don't talk out loud about it. Um, because maybe they have no interest or fear of whatever being judged on it. Now, the other aspect that that intrigued me, but not intrigued me, but I guess I connect highly on it's the horses. Right before doing the podcast, well, I have the Wire differently that I founded, and the first donation I was making was at Camp Praxis, which it was proven that horse as a way to heal people with trauma.
Mm,
And they're praised, right? And although they're a big animal, there's something so um, sensitive to them, right?
yeah.
So I kind of got hooked on. But you're right, and I wrote a book. I love writing as well. I have a joy to it. So I mean, you had all of this, and then we started to talk, and then we talked about kind of everything. Right? We call
Mm,
each other on the phone. We lost each other, I think, 4 or 5 times on the same call, but
yeah.
then the conversation was going easily. And I don't
Yeah.
think it was based because of trauma. I don't think it was based because of policing. It's just it's easy to chat. And like we said before we started to record, we said we got to start right recording now
Yeah,
because it's been 25 minutes, 30 minutes we're talking and it's not recording. And who knows, maybe we're going to say something brilliant all of a sudden.
yeah, that's right.
It's what's going to get out of it with this. Um, but yeah, so this is the magic part, I think, of it. And I'm so glad that we can connect on this because I think people will get out of what you're bringing so much that is online by your writing, by your little speech that you do on your stories, or I mean on your Instagram, and so on and so forth. Because you get a lot of people commenting, you reach a lot of people right there. I don't know if it was the goal of it or it was for you to release. What was the goal? Was it to help people? Was to just release something that you have inside of you?
Yeah, that's cool. That's a cool question, John. I've given that a lot of thought, and I can tell you what I said out loud. And just as a quick backstory, I never was a social media person. Um, I I got Facebook for the first time, I don't know, like 2010.
Okay.
I was on it for about 3 months and thought, nah, piss on this. It's not for me. So I canceled it. And then I ended up in a separation with a girlfriend that I was with who had a child with. And that's a whole other part of my life story. And I was found myself alone and single and by myself, and social media was the thing, right? And this was going into 2012 or the beginning of 2012. So I started up Facebook again in order to try and socialize and honestly to meet women because I was now in my mid 30s and single and I had a couple of boys at home by myself and I was a shift worker and I had no time to be in some sort of dating pool.
Yeah.
And ultimately I met my wife um, through Facebook. And so once our relationship was sparked within about 2 or 3 weeks of us being together, and I mean literally at the beginning of our relationship, I got rid of Facebook. And then I tried Twitter a couple years later for about 3 months, and it was an absolute dumpster fire that I wasn't interested in. And I
Still
also
is.
wasn't, yeah. And at the same time, John, I wasn't using social media in the most mature way either. I wasn't curating my own social media experience by only looking at the things that were interesting to me. I was watching everything, and part of that is the dumpster fire that is social media,
Mm-hmm.
or it can be.
Yeah.
And so I quit all social media for years. I didn't have any for years and years. And then when I found myself in this recovery zone with trauma, I found myself once again quite alone and at home by myself most of the day doing, homesteading type of chores and farming because I'm lucky enough to have bought a farm and have a lot of work to do. But one day I just took my phone out and I was out with the horses and I talked to them all the time and talked to them about random things and speak to them like they're people. And I recognized something in there and it was not new because it wasn't something that I could really put my finger on because I was new to farming. I'd never had experience with horses until I bought this farm. I'm like a total rookie on this. But there was something I sensed when I was around the horses that I was caring for. We board horses at our farm and we had as many as 8 on the farm.
Oh wow.
So I don't know if it was my wife's suggestion or if we talked about it, but I said, I'm going to start up Instagram and I'm just going to see if I can use it in a mature way and if I can be a voice for somebody to either change or improve because of what I've learned. And so I said to my wife, if I help one person, then I win. If I help one person improve in some way, then the whole thing is a win for me because I've helped one person and the rest is just a bonus.
Yep.
So within a few short weeks, I realized that I could openly speak about how I was feeling and what I was experiencing through the trauma of my job and my life, and I was relating to some people. And then a few weeks later, a person reached out that knew my wife and expressed that she had heard what I was saying and read some of the stuff I wrote, and it inspired her and it gave her the sense that there's lots of other people out there that are dealing with trauma this way. And
Mm-hmm.
she offered a lot of praise and thanks towards me. And it kind of brought me to tears. In fact, it did. It brought me to tears that I could have that kind of impact by just speaking
Yeah.
because I never feel, like, and I know that you and I have been able to learn about our lives through social media and by watching each other's posts and then by communicating and talking, like you said. Um, when I talk, very often when I'm speaking about something that involves me philosophizing about mental health or about life in general, I don't feel like I'm just talking with my voice and my experience, because I've had the unique opportunity after being a policeman for 19 years to literally deal with thousands and thousands of people's lives.
Yeah.
And I've got to, and you too. I mean, with your military and your police background, you know this too, because that's, humans are the commodity, right? Humans are the thing that you work in. They're the clay that you mold. You
Hmm.
know, they're the assembly line in the package that you deliver. And
Yeah.
I know that I'm using metaphor, but people are our thing.
Yeah.
And so you learn about people and you take a little bit of their story with you, and you exchange a little bit of your soul with their soul every time you deal with somebody. And I felt like I had a way or ability to express that with words and with writing. And so it just sort of evolved. And then the talking to horses hashtag that I started to put on my videos
Hmm.
sort of became my title, talking to horses, because I was making all my videos in the pasture, rain or shine, heat or cold, plus 40 or minus 40. It was me out with the horses chatting. And yeah, it's just my little thing in my little corner of the world, but it has actually in real time helped people. And
Hmm.
it has helped me. It's been a bit of a therapy session where I air out my grievances. I speak about my own thoughts and how I feel and how I see the world. And then I talk in a way where I suggest that there may be another option to healing or another option to look at the way that life is. And I try not to proselytize. I try not to sit on a raised pulpit and preach to a choir. I try to just use my own story and some of my own examples and a little bit of philosophy that I've read, because I'm a bookworm, and I try to sort of mold that into a 5 or 10 minute story multiple times a day. And that's what connected you and I ultimately, was
Yep.
we were in the same space. And we met the kind of the same people. You talked about the collective with Chance and Sean and
Yeah.
Seb and Satch and Julia and all the people that have sort of become part of that really cool group. We met through them,
Hmm.
and I've created some really awesome relationships with people because of this. So it's been a real awesome experience creating my own social media platform called Talking to Horses, because it's connected me in all these neat ways. And now here I
Hmm.
am sharing more wisdom with awesome people like you. And we've connected in this way. And now I'm sitting on your podcast. So,
And I mean, there's the other one too. And is a as and like like our small community. I said like 4 times in a row. In our community, we check on
like a
each other.
teenage girl.
Yeah, exactly. So, but we
Yeah.
check on each other. That's the other thing, right? Like, is
Yeah.
that person legit, right? And that was my thing. I asked Anne, and I'm like, she's like, he has a similar life that you had, right? So yeah, it'll be you'll get along. But I think we all do that. Like, we all check if that person is just a decent person. Looks really decent on what I see right now. But am I crazy? We've seen a lot of crazies or whatever that is you want to call it.
Yeah.
And I think there's the other thing that comes with that self-love, right? We want to protect ourselves from something that could be toxic in a life in a certain point, right?
Yeah.
That would drag you into that sickness all over again. And thanks to Anne, I mean, because well, she said that you're a bit crazy, but decent crazy. So
Yeah. Well, I've
there's
been called crazy most of my life. And I guess I think I accept that now as part of the reason why I would consider myself, without sounding too cliche to you, John, but that's why I consider myself wired differently. And it's
ooh,
what, yeah, it's what attracted me to when I saw your brand. In fact, I was starting to see your brand through the collective. And then
yeah,
just for anybody who's listening, Anne is Anne McEwen. She was my supervisor. She's a sergeant with the OPP, recently retired, and she was my supervisor for a few years and has become a dear friend of mine. We clicked and connected. We have a similar way of looking at life and how we move through our how we were moving through our career. And I found that she shared in the empathy that I was trying to exercise when I was doing my job versus other experiences I had with other police officers were lacking in that empathetic in the empathy department.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So yeah, Anne, I look up to Anne. She doesn't realize that she's got a lot of real life wisdom and that she is inspirational to a lot of
She
people,
is.
especially women, because she had a profound career. She did a lot of really good stuff. And then at the very end, they attempted to trample her for political and bureaucratic reasons, and it wasn't fair.
Yeah.
So thank you, Anne, for telling John that I'm crazy, because I guess I am a little bit weird.
But I think this is the other thing, right? Like the wire differently match, and the sheepdog, the black sheep, sorry, match as well. I find that a lot of people who actually push through a lot of things and are alone in their path quite often, they are those black sheep. They are they're wired differently. And as much as we might be rejected like through teenager years or youth or whatever you want to call it, because of the train of thoughts that we have, because the humor can be a bit different, because maybe we're too dark in some state of mind, or whatever the hell maybe it is. When you look at it after, and it's silly, but I said that to my psychologist yesterday in therapy. She's like, "Would you like to fit in?" I'm like, "No," but it has been so hard to accept that I don't want to fit in anymore,
Hmm.
versus being part of the flock, if you wish, right? Because would it be easier life to just not ask questions, right, and just nod and carry on? Yeah, I would. But is it the type of life I want down the road? Is the question that I had to ask myself. And the answer is no. And I mean, the wire differently was like when I started it, when I think it was in 2014 or 15, we were ramping up for Iraq back then. And we were working out in a gym, me and my wife in Ottawa, and it was the Greco at the time. So I don't know if it still exists, but that's what it was. And I was teaming up with an engineer, not a military engineer, just a normal engineer. So we were teaming up and doing lifting and so on and so forth. And he was asking questions about the military and all of those things. And he's like, "You guys are kind of wired differently, aren't you?" And I was like, "What do you mean?" And he's like, "Well, while we run away from it, you guys are excited to go that way." Right.
Hmm.
And I was like, "Well, yeah, like this is where you sign at the bottom of the paper. This is what," and I think that works for first responder. I think that works for military, which is still two different kind of community by all means, but you still are going the other side. And then you tag on the mental health aspect, which is very interesting as well, because it changed everything. Now it's wired differently on a different kind of level, right? I think I'm wired differently now for not, well, like you said, right? We have a spectrum of, I guess, somewhat tolerance, but where the schedule has to be done, we know when the sleeping is the best for us, which I just find out at 37 years old that, okay, well, go to bed around 10 o'clock. I'm up at 5 and I feel like I slept 15 hours, right?
Hmm.
But in truth, it's 7 hours and it's all I need. You would have asked me that like 5 years ago, where I slept 2 hours. It's probably not what I would have said. Um, but you take a lot of conscious and awareness decision in your life, which we did not do before. But that's
Yeah.
the wire differently of the mental health that change everything, and evolve you. And I think like we spoke before, um, the other part that is very hard, and I had that discussion with my wife last week, is while we change, while we have PTS growth, while life exposed us to a bunch of things that are not necessarily great, um, because the people who call police first responder in general, they're not having their best day. They're in crisis. It doesn't matter
Hmm.
what kind of crisis it is. Um, it burns a lot of level of energy, um, and then, well, you don't want to see the same thing, right?
Yeah.
Personally, I went to an accident 2 weeks ago, so we faced an accident, and I went back right off, right? Chaos is happening. Park the car. My wife's like, "What do I do?" And I call 911, tell them where we are, and she's like, "Where are we?" I'm like, "That's," and it just came back. Boom,
Yeah.
two-person bleed. No, okay, well, there's leaking. Car is total. It's done. She's like, "Who are you?" And I'm like, "Oh yeah, I called the police. They're coming." She's like, "What do you mean?" And she was a EMT. So she's like,
Oh, funny.
you act like a cop." And she's like,
Yeah.
"I'm totally fine. I was going to work, but I guess I'm gonna go tomorrow."
Yeah.
And but it becomes ingrained. Now, despite the wire differently of the mental health, what I found in you, which I find in a lot of us who serve, doesn't matter the uniform, you still serve,
Oh, yeah.
right? You said it, right? If I change one person, that's all I need. So you're serving. You're
Yeah.
serving to help someone, at least one person, to change their life. And I think this is the other part that we connected, because we're just Joe Blow normal Jason and John. Uh, Nothing is special, right? We're not from rich families. We're not from overly educated people. We're not none of it. We're just two guys who life brought them to serve.
Yeah. That's
Uh,
right.
and then we gain a form of wisdom, of knowledge, our self. opening, I don't even know how to call it anymore. But there's something that we got in the speaking of it, if it can, in the writing, if it can help, because I had the same thing when I wrote the book. The first time I received a review saying, whatever you felt in that book, I felt the same thing.
Yeah.
And thank you. And at first, I didn't know who the person was. It turned out it was a 68 years old male. And I was
Mm-hmm.
like, I'm a 34 person, 34 years old. And he never spoke about it, but he just told me that he felt exactly what I felt probably 30 years ago. So by helping, we're removing the stigma.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the end goal. By helping people to keep pushing forward, there's probably hopefully less suicide because it is pretty bad. There's just so many. The statistics with policing is pretty high, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, lately in the last, I would say 5 years, it's been increased. I don't know the percentage. I could probably search it, but it's been increased largely, and not just
Yeah.
policing, like first responder and military in general.
Yeah. Well, and what you said there about being in service to people, I have found out that that is what I desire to do. It literally is like a calling or a destiny to me because it when I'm operating in chaos, but I'm also helping with people,
Mm-hmm.
I feel the best.
Yeah.
And I know that the environment for me is going to be forever changed because I'm at a place right now where I'm probably not stepping into the police uniform anytime soon, if ever again. And so
Yeah.
I'm going to be exploring new options and new ways to serve people. But I feel really good. And if you think about life in general, there is no single job that you can do that is not in service to somebody else.
Yeah.
Everything we do is in service to others. So
You're right.
you can either do that with joy and love and gratitude and empathy,
Mm-hmm.
or you can just be miserable and serve others with a chip on your shoulder with a nihilistic attitude and make life hellish for you because you're going to serve other people no matter what you do.
Yep.
It's just the way humanity is. And if you walk around trying to avoid serving anybody, I think that's a pretty lonely road. I think that's a pretty destitute dead end, and it will cause you to live a life of misery. And you talked about the compassion fatigue in law enforcement, in the military, and wherever else. And I wanted to just mention this because not only does compassion fatigue give you a jaded sense of what the society around you is like and a nihilistic view and a sort of FTW kind of mental state,
Mm-hmm.
but you also lose compassion for yourself, and
Yeah.
then you really start to slide physically and mentally because you're not even caring about you, and you start getting this idea of like, what the heck is the point? What the heck is the point of going out running? Why do I even care about exercising? Why do I even care about my relationships or how clean my house is or what I'm doing with my body and my mind? Because you're it's masked because of the sadness and the sorrow of the PTSD. And so I just wanted to bring that up and mention that because I think that a lot of people forget that when you're putting your mask on first, it's so important for everybody who's in this space of helping others, especially in law enforcement, especially in emergency services and in the military, to have a nihilistic and jaded attitude towards people is a huge diminishing return on your ability to do your job properly and
Yeah.
with the right level of empathy.
Yeah.
Because when empathy, and I know this from watching guys and girls on the job who are having a rough day or having marital problems or are experiencing mental health trauma themselves and doing nothing about it. you can watch you can watch the life drain from a policeman or a
Yeah.
policewoman as the years go by if they're not doing anything to keep themselves well. And so many of us fall into that trap. So many of us do that. You get on the job and you're gung-ho and you're out there and you're really enjoying helping people and you forget about you.
Mm-hmm.
And then as time goes by and you decline in your physical and mental capabilities, so does your empathy for the people that you're dealing with, when that was what your goal was in the first place, was to go and help those people. And now you're doing it with no empathy whatsoever. And you're actually end up just being a shell. You end up being a police uniform on a shell. And
Soulless.
when people Yeah, and when you, like you said earlier, when somebody's calling you, they're not calling you to tell you how awesome their son or daughter just
Yeah.
colored at school, or that their child is having a baby. They're calling you with probably the worst day of their life or one of
Mm-hmm.
their bad days, and they expect you to fix it. And when you show up with a jaded attitude, they see it right away. They can tell by the way you hold yourself and the way that you react within the first minute of interacting with them, the way that you first respond to the questions or the complaints that they give you, and the attitude and the posture and those little body language things that we really, really are awesome at picking up as human beings, especially micro expressions in the face.
Mm-hmm.
You can see disgust in a police officer's eyes
Yeah.
when they've gone to their 7,000th domestic,
Yeah.
and they're sick and tired of dealing with it because they see what happens in the revolving door that is the Canadian justice system. And
Which
it's
is
a
extremely sad too. Let's be honest. We need
yeah.
we need something to change there because
Well, that's a side tangent we could go on
yeah,
forever, John. And I
yeah.
know, we both know what it's like, but that compassion fatigue not only affects how you view others, but it affects how you view yourself
Mm-hmm.
interacting with others. And so it's a dangerous thing. And I was into that for a long time. And when I say I live in chaos, when I was at my worst mentally and still showing up to work every day, just about every day, I would sit in my cruiser and I would drive around just desperate for the radio to go off that there was a fatality or a sudden death or a major domestic or an aggravated assault or a fight at the place where all the drugs are being dealt, so I could go and do something that would give me a dump of adrenaline, that would give me that dopamine hit, that would give me something to feel alive because I had become dead inside. And it was like the only thing that could really get me going is when you ramped up the call to like 10 out of 10, and I had no desire to do any of the 1 out of 10 garbage of my job. I just lived in the chaos that was the thing that kept me surviving. And I think you can probably relate to
Yeah.
that in some way.
Yeah. I think I I moved to a different district because we did different policing, right? You did rural policing and I did city policing, which is obviously something to mention, right? Like if you don't know about OPP, they're like RCMP. They're like
Yeah.
17 hours of backup away. So sort of say,
Sometimes.
right?
Yeah, sometimes. Yeah.
Because I look at the just the size here of what RCMP has to overlook. We have a one RCMP for whatever 38,000 people, and then like it's from here to Canmore, which is an hour and 15 minutes drive, like normal driving,
Yeah.
right? So if you have some shitty call going on, your backup is far. You got to learn how to speak, and yeah, 5'7" is not a tall size, right? And quite often
Yeah.
people are taller or bigger and whatever that is. So you gotta speak. And yes, there's cops who are looking for those different type of call where there will be more empowerment of physical violence, if you wish, or desire that. And there's others. Personally, I was just dead, man. At the end, more was going, more I was just attending the mental health call. And maybe it should have been a sign that I look
Mm-hmm.
into it. Um, but that's who I wanted to help. And I guess yeah, the sign was like help yourself because you're going down the hill in the mental health side. Um, and that's the people I love to help because officer didn't want to deal with another suicidal case, right?
Yeah.
I'll give you an example. I remember like it was yesterday. We it was a guy from Ontario actually, from the area of Sarnia. Is it Sarnia? It's
Yeah.
border of the. Anyways, we get a phone call from his sister in Ontario saying that he's suicidal and he has a plan and whatnot, right? So we attended, and uh and we enter the house, and the house is clean as it gets, man. So we talked to him, and he's like, I'm like, the beautiful question, do you want to kill yourself, right? And personally, I don't dwell with it. I'm gonna just ask it directly and see how you react. You can
Yeah.
lie, we'll see it. Same thing as the reaction you were talking about, or you can say the truth, right? And a person who really want to kill themselves will tell you, right? It will be pushed a certain way, right? Like it might not be I want to die now, but it will be you'll have a plan
Mm-hmm.
eventually that will be talked about. And he's like, "Don't worry, I know it's been called. She told me about it. I don't plan on killing me today, but I need to talk to my banker tomorrow just to make sure that my funds go to the right place and so on and so forth." So we keep on talking, and he's like, "I'm like, okay, so what's the way?" Well, he's like, "I look online and I discovered that 358 pills for helping me to sleep, go to sleep will actually hurt my stomach so much that eventually I will pass in my sleep. So 358. And I was like, did you buy that? Right. Because I couldn't find anything. He's like, well, if you go to my kitchen, the whatever furthest right drawer at the bottom has the pills there. And I went there and it was in a big bowl, man. Siren wrap on top. So no pills get like removed. And I guarantee you, I'm sure there will be 358 pills in this for sure.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And obviously we formed him. We went to church, to the hospital and so on and so forth. But he was prepared, right?
Mhm.
And I think that sometimes dealing with those people, that we if we can help them having a plan to actually get out of that tunnel, to realize that yes, the pain is horrible, and it will remain horrible for the longest time, because the darkest time of the day is right before the sunrise. But you need to battle that little time, that little hour out of the 24 hours, battle it so hard that you see that light just for
That you
another
get
day,
to that you get to
right?
the sunrise. That's right.
Yeah. And you, you,
Yeah.
you talk to any, and it's funny, right? Because any like super athlete, any special force guys that I talk to all told me the same. They all say, well, and it's kind of the same wording, right? But one will tell me, and I remember, forget, I don't remember his name, Greenberry, that a good friend of mine in US. He's like, I was just during Hell Week and during the training, it was next meal. We knew we had whatever steak. I was just thinking about that steak. That steak's gonna be good. And then the next meal, and the next meal, and so on and so forth, right? Because the day would go, and it would be
Yeah.
one less day to do. One more kilometers, right? So someone who do those hyper marathon or whatever that is, you must at one point have the brain to tell you, yeah, we're gonna start lying to you because we want to stop this. But your body can still going, but your brain says no. And
Yeah.
I heard a sentence today about that where they say, um, when you're at that breaking point, when your brain start to lie to yourself. And I was like, this is brilliant. This is well put, because it's true, right? You can
Oh yeah.
still push. It is a heavy weight. That is your run. That is whatever the hell maybe. I remember the military telling us, we're not stepping on until you puke. And it was
Mhm.
just for push it that extra mile. Well, it hurts so bad that next time you can go further because you pushed it. And
Yep.
I was like, brilliant. It's well said. And it's the same with recovery. It's going to be a shit show. It's going to be hard. And no, Coke is not probably the best way to go, or fentanyl, or whatever that is, because you're going to just restart, or prostitute. Because I heard those in peer support, right? I
Yep.
sat in peer supports for 2 years, and I remember one that I sat, and I never came back. And there's a male who was there. Apparently, he's there at every thing, and he's like, "I've been having PTSD since 1976. I tried everything." And when he said everything, he said coke, meth, and he was just naming every addiction possible, right? And I was like, "What about therapy? Right? What about ayahuasca? Ayahuasca. I cannot say that one either properly, but
Ayahuasca.
yeah, that one. What about like the hot tent, right? The native way. What about like microdosing, right? Like, have you tried those? And it was no, right? But all the addictive aspect had been tried. So, well, if you take the wrong path, you're not going to go towards, pass go and reclaim $200. You're going to go backwards. So I don't know. It's. I think we can keep on going with this because there's a big subject. But the thing that we wanted to bring up, because it's already been an hour and a half we're chatting.
Are
Uh,
you serious? Holy
yeah,
cow! Sure doesn't take long, eh?
we're about to breach that. Actually, we're an hour and 20 some minutes. Um, but the big thing we wanted to talk, you and I, and I'm gonna
Hmm.
let you say that. Um, it's we started to talk. There's project that we started to talk about, and we came to a common agreement. And I mean, go ahead, but uh, that's all. The floor is yours.
All right, well, let's do this. So I might have dropped a couple of hints online. I don't know if anybody really was catching what I was putting down there when I wrote that poem about Norse mythology. Um, but yeah, the cool announcement is that Black Sheep podcast and Talking to Horses is evolving into, drum roll, please.
Sorry, I don't have a drum.
Here we go. Welcome to the Raven Chronicles with Muninn and Huginn.
Yeah,
That's what we're doing, man.
it's funny because you and I juggle on names. I mean, how many names we got? I think we could go to our phone and we had like each of
Oh
us
man,
10
to try and
names.
find a title, yeah.
Yeah.
But
And
this one is really cool. I think however we develop, I think it was your idea initially, or we were talking about using some kind of symbology or a cool story to
mhm.
encapsulate what we wanted to do.
Yeah.
And once we hit on this idea, and I think you and I should talk about it a little bit just so everybody knows, and then we
Yeah.
can and then we can end it for today. But yeah, it's I'm excited, man. It's the Raven Chronicles with Muninn and Huginn. And do you want to start about that story, and then I'll add into it what that
Well,
means and
well,
what the story
for
is.
sure, for sure. I mean, we talk, you and I talk about, I think, history, right? For the fun of it, we kind of touch history when one of our
Yeah, that's right.
conversation, and then we touch Norse mythology for Seb Lovewood. Like we were talking that he's the one who gave me the name of Munin for the winter jacket that I designed for Wire Differently,
Right, right, right.
and then we talked about his business, right? The Raven.
Raven Strategic.
Bingo. I see my memory is crap. This is why you're here. And
Okay, well,
anyhow,
I guess I'll be Moonin because he's memory and you can be Hugin. He's the
eh,
thought.
well, and I think this is the beauty in it. It's because both of them complete each other,
Yeah, they do.
and we're in a different place, but on the same way, the same place. We bring subject that are similar but differently, and that reach out to different community or different type of people, but with the same message. And I think that's the strength of doing a pair for a podcast. Whenever we do chat, you and I, or when we have someone we invite on the show whatsoever. And this is the part where I think it became very, very interesting that you and I were able to chat nonstop. And there's not someone who's on top of the other, right, better or the other. I think we're just like I said earlier, right, like two normal dudes. Like you said, you do your farm, you have your horses and so on. I'm in my little semi-detached doing my dad, like I do the dad job upstairs with my kid during the day.
Yeah.
Just normal dudes and who push through things, and that we both believe, correct me if I'm wrong, that we can become whatever needed if we put the energy to it. And I think that's what we want to show and get to people on the show. It won't be necessarily a uniform show because we're not, right? We're not like you still part of the OPP by all means. You're not wearing one right now. You're not doing that under the OPP or doing that under Jason. Period.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
and it's maybe talking about economy. Maybe it's going to be shocking because we're going to upset people talking about politics because we might not align, and you and I might not align, which is fine. I think the beauty in this is it won't be necessarily a divide to it. It will be different view with respect.
Yeah.
Because I don't have to accept that you think that the earth is flat. I don't know. He probably doesn't believe that, but in case he does.
Hide
But
the flat earther information, honey. Damn. Yeah, no, I'm
uh,
not a flat earther. That's all right.
that's okay. I respect you. This is exactly it. But no, but that's the point, right? And this is the other aspect, right? Having two pair of eyes, two brains to see something brings a different perspective on everything. Um,
Absolutely.
and that's going to be the beauty of it, I think.
Yeah.
And just looking at the both lists, because we came up with we said to each other, just a 10 person you would like to have on the show. Now you put 35, I put 10 because I respected the rule. But I'm gonna just throw that out because I received your text and there was a 35 person. It was like, we said
Yeah.
10. But there was people, and I'm like, okay, well, we have kind of the same view.
Hmm.
Um, and it's gonna be good. So we're gonna have like from the psychologist person to the person who's an artist drawing to that high athlete as well that we're looking up to and so on and so forth, and maybe some people that we know as friends, right? We talked
Yeah.
about bringing our kids on the show because I think it's interesting, and we need to talk about it how the kids sees that like dad's not doing so well,
Hmm.
and there's question to be asked, right? And I mean, I mentioned bringing my wife, although I like to not hear that I was awful for 4 years, but like there's something to visit, right? So we're
Yeah.
gonna visit dark subject, fun subject, from history to geography to flat Earth, Jason. And but that was kind of it bought me out. I was like, "Yeah, I'm in."
Yeah.
And the second good news as well is we're gonna be in a channel by January. We've been invited to be on a channel. All the information will be released, and I'm looking forward to this because it's a good channel where there's a lot of opportunity to hear and learn about so many things. It
Right.
is not a more right or more left. It has nothing to do with this. It is a free mind kind of state that we're looking at being on a channel, and that's kind of what we're looking at talking. We
Yep.
don't want to remove subject, and I think if we don't know something, we'll say it to each other because I'm sure you know more stuff on some stuff, and vice versa.
Yeah.
So in the next episode, we will learn how to say your last name and my last name. But
Well, we'll do a 10-minute session on just pronouncing our last names. How about that?
you know what? Like the
Yeah.
funny part is right now with my child who's in grade one, he's learning those parts, right? And he's in the French school, but he learned English first. So he's like, how do I say this? And he says it in English. So my kid has an English accent speaking French, which
Oh,
is
that's funny.
funny as hell. Yeah.
It's the
But
opposite of you, eh?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
A for 22nd time. I'm gonna put that at the bottom here.
Yeah. Do we have
Um,
that ticker going, the A ticker?
we're gonna
Because
rewatch that episode, and I'm guarantee you we're gonna put numbers at the bottom.
yeah, pretty sure I say the word A a lot.
Yeah, it's okay. I swear, sometimes that's the English that's coming out pretty well, or the way I learned in the military, I would say. Because I mean, it's the same thing you said earlier when you brought up the lover aspect, um, about your mother and your stepdad. In my mind, lover met boyfriend girlfriend.
Right.
And I remember being on a call, and it's a mother was calling that her daughter as a boyfriend and their lover. So I'm explaining to a mother that her 14 years old can be a lover. And because in my mind, if you translate that word for word, met boyfriend girlfriend.
Ah,
My
right.
partner, and I was still in coach. So my partner said, "Go back in the car. I have to deal with this now, so we don't get a complaint
I have
again."
to correct your French accent mistakes. Whoops. Uh,
I had this one, and I had the other one where I was so shocked because we were attending a kidnapping of a cat, and
oh boy, oh boy.
yeah, there's
Yeah,
there's fun calls, right? And again,
yeah.
we're still coaching, uh, and I cannot believe we're standing in front of a couple who tells us that they have their cat kidnapped, and by the neighbor, but it's outdoor cat. The cat just did not come back since this morning, right? So he probably had his breakfast and left. Or did they getting a mouse or a rat or whatever that is?
Hard to keep a straight face on that one.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
and so I kind of became like faceless. I didn't want to have a reaction of like, oh my god, I cannot believe I'm here. And she's like, what are you doing? And I'm like, oh, I'm sorry, ma'am, I'm French, so it takes a time to translate. And I kind of pointed to my head. What I did not think is I had my earpiece
Yeah.
in my ear, and I'm pointing at this, and she's like, is it your machine that translate everything for you, and then you understand what I say? And my coach looked at me and she's like, I'm out. And she started to laugh loud. And I was like, ma'am, we're going to find your cat and I'll be back. We laughed. But, but yeah, you do what you have to do, right? Like it's
Yeah. Well,
just,
there's cat capers around every corner, man. Uh, let's talk about the story of Muninn and Huginn.
sure.
I think there's a lot of people that don't know what that means and what the story is, and I think um, it really, when we came up with this idea and we started to throw it around, what I saw was I think it aligned with what we wanted to do with a podcast. Because originally you reached out to me and said, "Hey, I'd love to have you as a co-host. What do you think?" And I had been brainstorming my own evolution in the
Mm.
background, wondering how I was going to take flight and what I was going to do. And I was already kind of planning this. So I thought, oh, this is a cool opportunity. And I think that we align in this way and it works perfectly to the story that where we want to be in service to people by gathering as much wisdom and knowledge and stories from the world around us and sharing it with people because it can be inspiring and it can be helpful. We're talking about suicide and of course, I want to prevent suicide. I lost a work partner and a friend 2 years ago to suicide, and he'd been retired for 4 years. And um, So the Norse mythology story of Muninn and Huginn are they are the pair of ravens that sit on the shoulder of Odin. And every morning they go out and they fly over the nine realms and they gather all of the information, knowledge that they can, and they bring it back to Odin. And the story goes that Odin actually sacrificed his eye in order to gather wisdom. And it kind of speaks to that wisdom is sometimes gained through sacrifice, and wisdom is sometimes gained through hardship. And so you and I, being the two ravens, Muninn and Huginn, we are using this podcast platform as a way to fly out over the nine realms and gather information and bring it back. And I guess Odin would be the audience.
Mhm.
We're bringing the information to the audience, who would be Odin.
Whoever wants to
So
listen. Yeah.
yeah, well, it might be one person, right? And if it's one person who listens, I think that's a victory, and then we'll see where it goes from there.
Yeah. And worst case
But
scenario, we have a good conversation.
yeah, right on, right? It's fun, it's enjoyable. So I'm really looking forward to it, John, because I think we align in a lot of different ways. And um this is like a really cool way for me to be in service to people, because I feel like if we do it right, and if we do it aligning with the things that we've spoken about, which is to gather knowledge and wisdom and
Yeah.
insight, and to inspire people to be better and to take care of each other mentally and physically.
Mhm.
I think there's a great space for that. And I think what you said about having us not be target specific with our audience and with the people that we are going to interview. Um, I'm excited to interview the janitor of a high school, just as I'm excited to interview the professor of an elite university, because I think that you can get important wisdom and amazing stories from people that have an entry level position in the hierarchy of life, or who hold some sort of prestigious career, and everybody in between. They all have a really cool story. And I have found that I love to share in the wisdom of others and swap ideas with people. And in this way, I think what you do is you gather these souls on you, and you become more wise when you interact with people. So I think we share in that. In the story of Muninn and Huginn being these wisdom seekers for Odin, I think that really was like boom. When we saw that idea, it was like, oh man, that's where we're going.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know
Yeah.
which one you're going to be and which one I'm going to be, but
A mix
doesn't
of
really
both.
matter. Yeah, we'll take turns. How about that?
And then I mean we came up with a logo as well, right? And that was
We
another
did.
because those are all work behind I mean the podcast itself, right?
Yeah.
I had to find software to edit everything and so on and so forth. But as an example, but there's the logo, and I want to thank Chris Williams from MIA.
Yeah.
He did our logo, and he didn't charge anything. So I just
Oh,
sent him
nice.
money for tips because I'm stubborn and he deserves as money. But and it's going to be in the corner right here. I really appreciate it because it's the yin and the yang, and the yin and the yang that we looked at. It's because two-person are different and complete each other, but that's exactly what Muninn and Huginn is. They
Yeah.
complete each other in that quest of knowledge. That is, one is more wisdom based, that the other one is more compassion or dreamer, and so on and so forth. And with this, what I want to bring as well is uh, I mean, we're both, I believe, too neurodivergent, which add to see the world differently from our own eyes. Um,
Absolutely.
and I mean, uh, we said crazy earlier, but I just think that because of that neurodivergent, that rejection came in as well, which is part of what we had to go through, which is fine. Um, and what we had to develop, to having a shell, to actually become stronger, and so on and so forth, to fall and get up and fall and get up. But that allows us to also bring and deliver that knowledge differently, or what we learn and seen. I don't think we're Atlas where we knows everything, and that's the beauty. It's the quest of knowledge. It's and never stopping, right? Because
Yeah.
we talked about it before, and you told me I'm a big nerd, and I'm like I'm a big nerd too. I mean, I have tons of books, and I like to play my games and whatever that is maybe, but I also love going to my gym and burning some sweats, and I mean doing that normal thing,
Yeah.
um, which is, I think, great. It's a good balance.
Absolutely. And like we when we were talking about incorporating the symbol of yin yang with the two ravens that symbolize the two of us in this podcast, Um, and I'm really excited to share that artwork with people because it turned out so spectacular. But you know, the kind of the basic idea of the yin yang is there's a little bit of darkness in the light, and there's a little bit of light in the darkness, and there's a non-duality of life where everything has its opposite. Everything is has two sides of one coin, and so we've got, and I will the artwork will speak for itself.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful piece that Chris made for us, and I'm excited to do the reveal. I'm excited to put out the first episode, and we've got a lot of work ahead of us, and it's I'm really looking forward to it, man. I think it's going to be a real fun path to be on.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's just the beginning, right? Whatever it comes and
This
brings
is just
us.
number one. It's you got to start in the basement of everything that you do. Every time you start over, you're at the beginning. You're a rookie. You're a noob. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to fail. You're going to think that you suck. You're going to have imposter syndrome. You're not going to feel like you fit in. You think you're going to never make it.
Yeah.
But I don't think you and I have that quit attitude. And I don't think you and I are the kind of people that aren't going to persevere this and push it to its limit in our own way.
Yeah.
And so I'm really looking forward to it. I'm excited for this, man.
Yeah.
And I think people need to know that talking to horses isn't going anywhere.
Mhm.
I'm still going to have my own little personal time to philosophize and think and express my own wisdom in that way. And Wired Differently isn't going anywhere.
No.
It's just that we're merging into the Raven Chronicles with Muninn and Huginn.
Yeah, which will be a weekly podcast that will be released, and we also look into doing once live a week. But I will probably start after a few weeks, just so we can have our feet wet and I mean grounded as well at the same time.
Yep.
Um, so there's a lot of work that we're doing behind the curtains, but it's the fun work to grow everything up. Because let's be honest, right? Like it's having an account, it's having an email, it's having a beginning of the website, the video that tells us it's that podcast, and then it's the recording, it's learning the editing. It's the fun part. It's the long work part. I remember talking to Chance when he got me on his podcast, and he was like, "Oh man, I have to edit for a couple hours this week." And I'm like, "What do you mean a couple hours?" And excuse me, I edited some of my podcasts before, and yeah, he's right. It's a couple hours. It takes
Mm-hmm.
patience, and you need to learn about all everything that speaks and so on and so forth. So you'll be able to, I mean, find us on this. And obviously, if you listen to us right now, you're probably on either YouTube, Spotify, Apple Chromecast, or Anchor. If there's any other demand or you want to hear us somewhere else, please put that in the comments so I can actually, we can actually put that and add it up to a different a different platform, and from there we can actually as well be bigger on that aspect or be heard differently. If you want to see someone as who comes talk with us, that can go in the comment. It can send me an email as well, and the email will be most likely for the moment the Raven Chronicles, right? I'm not doing that backwards
No,
again.
you said it correctly with your French accent. It was perfect.
At gmail.com. And I mean, I will put that right here just so you're sure to see it. You can reach us at this and tell us what you want to hear talk about. Like I said, it won't be always with someone else, a third person. It might be me and Jason just getting lost into our minds, and speaking about whatever the hell maybe we want to talk about that day. Or it might be with someone else. And again, if you're not agreeing with whatever we say, I mean, I'm more than happy to hear what your point of view is, because
Yeah, absolutely. I think
it,
that that's a healthy thing, that we need
yeah,
to have that constructive criticism, and that sometimes people are going to disagree with the things that we have to say because we're not professionals.
no, no,
We're just two dudes. You know,
yeah,
we're just two dudes with unique life experience and a unique way of looking at things. So, yeah, uh, I think it's a good time, even though it's at the very end of the video, to remind people that if they're interested in this and they like it, and it will be helpful to us to make sure that they like, share, and subscribe.
yeah,
Um, for in the future, we'll have that at the beginning of the damn things.
yeah, 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 yeah.
But honestly, folks, if you've gotten this far, like, share, and subscribe. The community support that I've gotten through talking to horses has been incredible, and I've done my best to support other podcasts and other people out there that are inspirational and that are working hard to try and kind of change the world in their own way. And I think as community people, we should try and be bringing everybody up with us as we can. And I think that probably, well, with certainty, I will and we will be promoting other people's artwork and creativity and their expression as best we can. And we just look for the same kind of support from the community that is interested in watching and listening.
Yeah. Yeah. And what did I wanted to say? There's one thing I wanted to say, one more thing. So we said share and subscribe, right? And this is all my memory. Like, share and
share,
subscribe.
subscribe, hit the
Um,
notification bell.
get the
Right? You got
ding.
to have that one. Yeah, this is new to me, man. I don't have a silver play button behind me here, so I'm not a YouTube star.
We're gonna have to have a list, right? Like just to go through, check, check, check.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um, but yeah, just be with us the next episode. You won't regret it. I'm not
Yeah,
gonna
it'll be
tell you
fun.
who's gonna be with us yet. That will be a surprise. And maybe there will be nobody. Maybe it'll be Santa Claus. Who knows? Or the Grinch, or what did I show my kid? Krampus. I showed my 5 years old Krampus. Might be Krampus too.
Yeah,
Um,
maybe.
but just be there. And I hope you're gonna, sign up with us because I guarantee you it's gonna be fun. We're gonna all learn and we're gonna all laugh. I'm really excited to the live we're gonna do because I've never really done their them except on the collective,
Right.
and it was great to see people commenting and saying like, "What about this? What about that? What about this?" And it's totally real. You need to figure it out as it goes, and people have question that sometimes you don't think about, right? So
That's right.
more head we have, better it is, right? I don't think it's always true that more guys in a group we are, less brilliant we are. It's not always the case. In some case, more head we are, better it is and better it goes. So tune up to the next episode. Let us know what you think about this one. It will probably be a 2 episode because the 2 parts for sure. So we've been talking for 2 hours.
Oh my
Um,
God, yeah, this is gonna have to be broken up. We might
oh
have
yeah,
to edit some stuff out.
we'll go with the flow, man. There's
Yeah, man.
that to each their own, and again, like it's the last one of Black Sheep. Goodbye, Black Sheep. Welcome the Ravens, and we're gonna do that together for sure. Thank you so much for listening to us, and we'll talk to you soon.
Peace.
Bye.